What's happening, fam? Welcome back to the channel. Hope everybody's doing well. So today is going to be a very interesting topic that a lot of you guys are going to be able to benefit from. And first of all, shouts out to my boy Jose. He was the one who gave me the idea for this. I'll explain that in a little bit. Also, shout out to my boy Melvin in Florida. Guy's always been there for me ever since I started YouTube, and he helped me conduct a lot of research in this because this is a very, very interesting topic. And by the end of this, you guys are going to agree. So, have any of you guys ever heard of the Big Three or Big Four or any variation of that? If yes, then you know what I'm talking about. If no, then let me explain what the Big Three consists of. It's not necessarily, oh, and by the way, guys, I disconnected my alternator wire right here and some of the harnesses. I also disconnected my negative and positive terminal from the battery, so nothing is touching, so there's no voltage going through anywhere. But what the Big Three is mainly about, it's literally not subtracting but adding to your current wiring scheme. And let me explain. So normally it's adding an additional wire from your positive pole on the alternator right here to the positive on your battery, the negative pole to the chassis here or here, and from the chassis to the actual engine block. And a lot of you are going to be like, well, why the hell do I need to do that? Guys, you have no clue how important grounding is, and neither did I until some crazy shit happened to me literally 2 weeks ago. So this video, I think today is the 8th of September. So 2 weeks ago, when my car was getting dynoed, everything is good. This beast was, Junior, my tuner, did a couple test pulls on it. When he was ready to pull for power at the top 7,500, 8,000 RPM, and boom, the ECU just cut. Voltage dropped heavily. Now, let's step back for a second. Most of you guys who know my build, this alternator right here, about a month ago I did a video. This alternator is from DC Power. This is one of the baddest alternators you can get. It's 270 amps. So by having a 270 amp alternator, you guys are like, well, why did your voltage drop? That's a really good question. Just because you have a balls to the wall alternator, but now you have a bigger demand for power. My injectors are 3 times the size. I have a fuel pump in my gas tank and 3 fuel pumps in my trunk. So now when my turbo starts spooling up, and once you start hitting boost and you're calling for more fuel, it wants to activate the fuel pumps. You're gonna have a voltage drop. Now you're saying, well, the alternator should have taken care of that, right? But now look how thin the original wires are. And what you guys don't know is they had to take my car off the dyno. An hour later, they pulled it in the shop and they changed out 2 of the grounds. They put thicker gauge wire. I'll put up a picture of the old grounds, but they put thicker gauge wire, and would you believe, it took care of the freaking issue. The car went on the dyno fine, but then something else happened. It had a fuel issue, but that's besides the point. The voltage issue is taken care of because the grounds were a lot thicker. So the energy transference was a lot faster. So what a lot of people don't understand, energy wants to flow positive to negative, literally at almost the speed of light. It wants to get there as quick as possible. It's almost like taking a cup of water and throwing it on the floor. Take a cup of water, throw it on the floor, it'll go into all the cracks and everything just like perfect. Energy is literally just like that, but it wants to go a lot faster. So now you have a big alternator putting out a ton of power, okay? Small power wire, small grounds. And the reason why a lot of the grounds are small, especially in cars like today, is because copper, look at this wire right here. This is about 4 or 5 feet of copper, right? Let me see. 5 feet of copper, and that was like almost $40. Copper is very expensive. So what companies do now, they put thinner and thinner grounds just to satisfy the bare minimum standards in the automotive industry. So that's why the more you know, the better off you are. And I really didn't know how important grounding was. And most of the people who do the big three, as I talked about, are audiophiles, guys who are really big into music. That's why I said, shouts to my boy Jose. He was the one who told me about this. And once I started digging into this, it made a shit ton of sense. A shit ton of sense. Because think about it like this. I upgraded my car. My car is over 700 horsepower at the wheels. Therefore, it's a lot more electrical demand from fuel pumps, injectors, all that stuff. It's literally like I have a big music system in my car. So, same concept applies. You get what I'm saying? So, food for thought. So now, a lot of you guys think that the battery makes power. It does not. The battery stores positive and negative energy. The alternator, on the other hand, makes AC power. And there's something, this portion on the back of it here, this is called the bridge rectifier. And what the bridge rectifier does is a positive and negative portion in that rectifier that converts that AC energy into DC power. So, as I said before, the big three is adding to your positive wire, adding to your negative, like from the negative on the battery to the chassis, and then from the chassis to the block, things like that. And there's one more thing that I will tell you to do. You want to add a negative wire from the back of the alternator, either from this through bolt right here or the back all the way here, because the rectifier, the negative portion, is bolted to the back here. So this entire piece, it's negative energy. And if you put a ground from here to the negative terminal on the battery, the transference of power is going to be a ton faster, instead of it having to go all through the bolts and through the alternator case, all through the body and circulate it around and get back to the battery. That's too long. It's because what a lot of people don't understand is the longer it takes for that energy, and if your wires are not thick enough, the longer it takes to get to the negative portion of the battery, what ends up happening is the rest of that energy ends up dissipating into the alternator case as heat. That's why some people's alternator, they can break it. And just because of wiring, grounding, everything I'm about to tell you. So I guess the more you know. So now what I have here, let me show you guys real quick. Obviously I have 4-gauge wire, because I'm just adding to the grounds. I'm not subtracting, I'm not taking away anything from the car. I'm just literally adding. And I have a 0-gauge wire right here. I was gonna run a 4-gauge, but since my alternator is 270 amps, 0-gauge wire is perfect for a high output alternator. So what's voltage? Voltage is it's energy in the form of an electrical charge. What's current? Current is the flow of that electrical energy, and it's derived in amps. Okay? So now, and then you have resistance, which slows the flow of electrical energy. So now, if you have the wrong wire, okay, if you have too thin of a gauge wire, I'll actually put something up on the side so you at least you can see which wire corresponds to the amount of volts and or amps. So if you have too thin of a wire, this wire can overheat and you can start a fire. So now, a couple tools I'm gonna have. So guys, if you wanna make up your own kit, everything that I'm gonna tell you here is gonna be in the description. I actually pieced together this kit for about, I would say roughly $150, somewhere around there. You can make up your own kit. The reason why, there are some companies selling these kits, they're like $100 just for the wire. Just for the wire. I got this hydraulic crimping tool with a freaking wire cutter, which is freaking sharp, by the way. I got that, the 4-gauge wire, 4-gauge positive, negative wire right here. The zero gauge I had to buy separately. And by the way, guys, you want to use OFC, oxygen-free copper. You're gonna see some zero gauge wire like $25 on Amazon or eBay. Do not buy that. It's called CCA. That's copper clad aluminum. Okay, it'll do the job, but it's not as good as 100% copper. The conductivity on this thing is insane, and that's what you want. Massive amounts of electrical flow. So I'll put everything. These are eyelets over here. These range down to 2 gauge wire. Got heat shrink. And this right here is very, very important. This is an A&L fuse. This fuse is gonna go between the alternator and the battery. So if anything happens, the fuse is gonna pop instead of you're gonna having a fire. Obviously you don't want that. The cool thing about this fuse, there's that ring in there. Check this out. This ring can fit up to a 2 gauge. Now all you do is you unscrew here. 1 second. Shake the ring out, and now you could put a 0 gauge wire in here. They thought of everything for this 300 amp fuse. So the fuse I got, it's a little bigger than the capacity of the alternator for some cushion. And that's really it. So what I am going to do now is I'm gonna start cutting up the wire. What I'm gonna have to do also is put the car on ramps, because what I will do, there's 2 grounds from the body of the car, from the chassis to the actual car. There's one on both sides. There's one on the driver and passenger side. And then I'm gonna be putting a negative wire from the negative terminal of the battery to the chassis right here or right here. And obviously, you know, I'm gonna be running my positive wire from the alternator to the positive on the battery, okay? All right guys, so the positive side is pretty much done. Just remember, when you are cutting the wire to fit it inside of this space, don't cut it too long where wire is exposed over here. Make sure you cut it short enough so that the wire is not exposed. Also, well, I don't have to worry about that too much due to the fact that these cool protective cases here as well. That's a nice touch. But as I said, don't have this jacket over here exposed with wire, okay? Just make sure, watch how you're cutting it. Also, just because it was 5 feet of 0 gauge wire, that doesn't mean you run it all around the engine bay. You want this wire as short as possible, short and sweet. Also the grounds. So now all I gotta do is from the negative terminal to the back of the alternator, negative to right over here on the chassis. Back here, there's grounds that Rafi at Prime replaced. So this is running from the chassis to the body, actually from the chassis to the motor, which is cool. So now once I'm finished up here, I just got to do the 2 grounds from the chassis to the motor underneath, okay? All right guys, I'm back a couple days later. Had to take a little bit of a break because that day it had a really bad rainstorm. Then the next day it rained, and then it went right up to Wicked Big Meat. So this is the day after Wicked Big Meat, so I can continue this install of the big 3, 4, 5, whatever variation you want. It doesn't matter. As I said, wherever you can see some good grounds, just add to it, and trust me, I'll actually explain that after. Now, underneath the car, underneath the car, when you take your skid plate off, you'll see right here, see this location right here, see this tire right here, that I'm going to be replacing that, and there should be another one right here. On the passenger side, this one right here, I'll be replacing that as, actually I'll just be adding to it as well. Okay, so you can either replace it or add to it, but I will actually, no, I have to replace this, because guess why? Look at this. It's literally it's hung on by a thread. It can literally, look, ready? 1, 2, 3. There you go. So yeah, I'm gonna be replacing this. So that's the best thing I could, these are, you know, they use these for obviously higher temperatures, but they break really, really fast. Even in my truck, they break off. So it is what it is. So either you can, as I said, you can just replace this or add to it. Now, since my headers are here, guys, definitely high heat tape and some type of sleeving just like this right here will protect it from getting burnt up, because I'm telling you, wire will get burnt up by these headers, or pretty much any headers, that's anything that's super hot and close, you know what I'm saying? So here we go. And oh, before I forget, guys, just remember, when you take these bolts off right here, make sure just use a little sandpaper or a little brush, sand the surface, add some dielectric grease before you put your new wires on, you know what I'm saying? Definitely helps wick any type of moisture out of the area to prevent any type of corrosion, all right? Okay guys, the install is complete. As you can see right here, guys, make sure you're using enough wire so it's not too tight, so when the motor torques, you're not going to rip anything or whatnot. You know, just be smart, use just enough so that you have some leeway. And on the passenger side, you're going to see I use an aluminized Velcro heat sleeve, because the wire, I end up running it through this bracket right here so that it's not hanging down, but the wire is very, very close to the header. So obviously, guys, if the wire is very, very close to this header that possibly gets red, you know, you don't want the wire burning off. And that's the reason why, if you notice that the wire was easy to break off, because from that heat after a while, you could tell that it weakened the wire. So I was able to just rip that off with my hand. Now, this, obviously, guys, make sure you tighten everything down. Don't He-Man it where, you know, you're trying to, you know, break the motor or anything like that. Please, guys, use your head when you're tightening this stuff down. You know, snug it, quarter turn, that's it. So everything is run. You have a ground here, ground here. I ran 2 upstairs and a power wire. So for me, this time, it was literally the big 5 or whatever, as I said, whatever variation you want to call it. It's very, very simple. You don't necessarily have to subtract. These, though, I did subtract. I did take out the braided lines, because, as I said, they're very, very, they're not that strong, and they get rotted really fast. So got this 4 gauge over here, got one over here. Let's go to the top of the motor. So now at the top of the motor, see me run the 0 gauge wire right here from the alternator to the positive of the battery, and obviously the ground from the chassis to the negative terminal, and also from the back of the alternator, okay, straight over around here, right to the negative terminal. So I, besides the ground wires that Rafi at Prime upgraded, I end up doing 4 more and a power wire. So as I said, guys, again, I'm going to reiterate, you don't necessarily have to take away. You can add to your existing setup. So by you upgrading your power and ground wires, especially the grounds, you're going to let it get to where it needs to. I'm telling you, there'll be a lot faster energy transfer. And I want to show you something too. I actually noticed it a couple days ago when this wasn't recorded or anything like that. I want to show you what happened to my voltage. All right, fam, what I wanted to show you is this car is hot right now, and it is holding a steady voltage at 14.6. On a cold start, this car does a 14.8. As it starts getting warmer, it might 14.7, but it holds steady at 14.6. I went from a 14 on a cold start down to, when this car is hot, 13.9 to 13.8. I literally went up almost an entire volt, literally, from just changing out my grounds or adding to it, as I said before. And this is what you guys need to understand. So I'm not one of the YouTubers who is doing this based on other people's recommendations, because most of the people who install this, the big 3, 4, 5, whatever variation of it, most people who do it, they've seen other people do it on YouTube, so they know, well, this is what I'm supposed to do for my loud sound system or whatever. Nobody really ever mentions this for a high horsepower build. And I'm living proof of it, because the shit happened to me on the dyno where we were getting bad voltage drops besides my badass alternator. So you get what I'm saying? The more you know, the better off you are. Plain and simple. So, as I said, guys, I'm glad you guys hung out with me for this one. Definitely like, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think. But as I said before, I'm a living example of having issues on the dyno because of voltage. Then following what my boy Jose was telling me about the big 3, educating myself on it about alternators and wiring and so forth. But anyway, guys, thanks for hanging out with me. I'll talk to y'all soon. Take it easy.